the armor will enter the land. The battle belongs to the Lord. No weapon that's fashioned against us will stand. The battle belongs to the Lord, and we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. We sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. When the power of darkness comes in like a flood, the battle belongs to the Lord. He's raised up a standard, the power of his blood. The battle belongs to the Lord, and we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. We sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. When your enemy presses in hard, do not fear. The battle belongs to the Lord. Take courage, my friend, your redemption is near. The battle belongs to the Lord, and we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. We sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord, and we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. We sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving, and exalt him with music and song. For the Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. In his hands are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, he made it, and his hands form the dry land, and his hands form the dry land. Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving, and exalt him with music and song. For the Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. In his hands are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, he made it, and his hands form the dry land, and his hands form the dry land. You are love, you are life, you are Lord over everything. Alpha, Omega, Jehovah, the King of Kings, wonderful way maker, worthy of my offering. Hallowed be thy name.
Yes, Lord,
You are love, you are life, you are Lord over everything. Alpha, Omega, Jehovah, the King of Kings, wonderful way maker, worthy of my offering. Hallowed be thy name.
You're the answer to all of my problems, and you'll solve them.
Hallowed be thy name.
You supply all my needs, and I call you Abba Father.
Hallowed be thy name.
You're my almighty fortress in a time of tribulation.
Hallowed be thy name.
And I'm more than a conqueror in every situation.
Hallowed be thy name.
Yes, Lord,
You are love, you are life, you are Lord
You are the
over
Alpha
everything. Alpha, Omega, Jehovah, the King of Kings, wonderful way maker, worthy of my offering. Hallowed be thy name.
You're the only God, and there will never be another.
Hallowed be thy name.
And 10,000 angels couldn't tell how much
Are the speakers on? covered and brings anything to your mind, maybe we can discuss that. So anyway, like I said, I'm just going to go through here probably faster than I should. But I'm going to get into today's class, which is, of course, a haven for healing. So, let's see. The first one that we did was built to last. We talked about how the community, the church, was designed by God. And so, the tools that He's given us to last, we have to refigure everything out, and the design will stand the test of time. And the second week, we talked about everyone's involved. This is where we covered, we talked about the Corinthian church and how a lot of people were doing a lot of things different and not really working together, but that the design is that we should all be different and we should find our spot and how we can work together as a team. Everyone's invited. This is where we talked about that the church needs everyone and that it should be a place intended for healing, forgiveness, and equality. We gather together. So this is where we kind of covered, we come together. This is, again, a community class. And so kind of pointed out that anyone can praise God in solitude, but the Bible teaches that God is pleased through our worship together in a community. Kind of compared that a little bit to maybe a family tradition, sitting around the dinner table, and how important that is. Community commission. This is where we talk a little bit about evangelism and reaching the lost as a whole, or we looked at how Jesus sent out pairs, and that we do this together. So we often think about us sharing our story with others and trying to bring other people to Christ, but also that we can do this together as a mission together. Servant's entrance. Talked about how we can serve each other. Highlighted that it's pretty easy to look at our bulletin and see that there's a lot of needs out there, and trying to figure out what our job can be in that service, and making sure that we don't just feel obligated. And they'll know we are Christians. This is where we talked about love and how we're showing that love to the world, so that they know that we are of Christ. And then we looked at Jesus washing the disciples' feet, and looked into that. Number 8 was true confessions. Talked about how we can grow and develop our relationships with each other to be able and comfortable confessing our sins to one another. And then last,
leaders of Israel weren't looking out for anybody but themselves. They're taking care of themselves, taking all the best. I mean, they weren't living their lives with a concern for the sheep. They didn't feed them. I mean, you think about all the duties of a shepherd. Feeding the sheep is about probably job number one, right? I mean, we're not talking about teaching them calculus or something. It's
Right.
I mean, they weren't taking care of basic needs. And he goes through the litany of things saying all these things. They were lost, they were injured, you didn't do anything about them. And like most things, it's indicative of where their heart is. Their heart wasn't with the sheep. They were thinking of themselves, not the sheep. So God said, I'm going to take care of them. You guys aren't doing it. I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, so when I first read the title of this class, I was thinking, people coming in and how we should serve each other. And I think that that's true. But the guy who put this together really makes the point that it starts with the leadership and how much God expects the leadership to take this initiative, right? And so even when Jesus, so this obviously Old Testament, Jesus came and he said a very similar story in Luke 15. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that's lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he has come home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. So I just wanted to include that as a contrast here of what good leadership looks like versus what poor leadership looks like. And I think that we could just use that word leadership and think, well, elders and deacons are responsible. They're the shepherds. Do we think that that's true, or do we all have a responsibility for this as well?
I keep going back to one of the earlier questions that you asked, which was your favorite of the list of things that we've discussed. And one of my concerns was church splits, what causes them, and so on. And then what happens after the split? You've got two arguing. You've got two groups of people who think they're right. Otherwise, there would not have been a split. Because there's an argument, I'm right and I'm going to prove it, and and so on and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I see this concept that you're talking about now applying to the split, how important the job of the elders becomes after a split, how to bring, they have two choices. They either try to bring the two back together to one, or they've got to have two separate groups, and they've got to shepherd these two groups. The elders have an additional problem to try to keep each group going. Otherwise, a lot of terrible things happen after a split.
Sure. So do we think that, or is it possible that us as individuals could reach these people better, or maybe we have other relations individually that maybe the elders wouldn't have with these people? And if that's the case, does that give us some responsibility to take that initiative as well? So, like, if someone needs healing of whatever kind, right, like a split or something, I guess I'll just say what I'm thinking. I do believe that the leadership of the church has a responsibility for this, as we're seeing here. But I also don't want us to sit here and think, well, that's Scott's deal. If he's not doing it, well, okay. But if Ryan and I have a relationship and Ryan's not happy with something, and maybe I have a better relationship with Ryan than Scott does, or someone else that's in leadership. And I feel like that becomes my responsibility to see, well, what is my part in this healing process? And I think under this umbrella of healing, or under this umbrella of community that we're talking about, we all have to look and see kind of what can I do?
One of the things I think, if we see, he spends so much time talking about us as a family. And that is a vivid picture that he paints with us, with God the Father is our Father, and Jesus is our brother, and we're all brothers and sisters in this together. If you think about the way a family works, the families that work well are ones where everybody pitches in, right? When they see something, they all work together. And it's also amazing to me when you look through the first century church and you look at what elders spent most of their time doing. It was, teaching the word and in prayer, right? There's other places where the shepherds were told you're to equip the saints. Didn't say make sure you guys individually just do all the work for them for everybody, so everybody else doesn't have to do anything. But I mean, one of the things that hopefully has come out as we've talked about our identities as a family of believers here is the fact that service to each other and to the world beyond is something that's central to who we are. So it's not just a thing of, let's all sit here and just see what the leaders are going to do, right? Hopefully if the leaders of a congregation are in prayer, right, and know the folks in their congregation and are good encouragers, you should see more activity. And you should see people loving each other well.
Yeah.
So I think, obviously, the elders have to give an account. They have to oversee the flock. So it is specifically said that we'll have to give an account. However, I think as individuals, and I'm reminded here of Romans 14, 11, 12, and even 13, it talks about every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. But 12 and 13 is important here too. It says, so each of you shall give an account of himself to God. Therefore let us not judge one another anymore, but rather resolve this, not to put a stumbling block or a cause to fall in our brother's way. So when we are doing things like Bob Jewell said, that's basically because we feel a certain way and we're trying to prove we're right. We just need to let our pride go sometimes and pay attention to our brother as much as we pay attention, if not more, than ourselves.
I appreciate those comments, bro. I think in this context, Alton, when we're looking for, or we're looking at a haven for healing, looking at Ezekiel and Luke, speaking of Ezekiel and Luke, I think we must remember that the church is a hospital for lost sinners, or for found sinners. And in that context, like I've spent a good half year locked up in a Los Angeles hospital after my car accident. And what was interesting about that experience in general, and how it applies to us today, is that everybody in the hospital has a role to play. The doctors, of course, the therapists, even the social workers, they all have a role. And I think that fits in this context of a haven for healing, because we all have our role, not just the elders and deacons, but even the little guy, the little woman, even even me, even everyone
Sure.
has their role in this haven for healing. And so,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think about the cooks that bring the food to you when you're in the hospital.
Yeah.
Right? They're not like qualified PhDs, but you're happy to see them, right? There's my Jell-O. Sorry.
So, potential splits can be avoided, hopefully, when the members of the church act as peacemakers with brothers and sisters who are upset and might go off in that direction. There's a lot of healing that can be done that can prevent those things, as well as just brothers and sisters that are hurting, that need someone to go out and find that lost sheep and just minister to them. And it's so easy to be so caught up in our daily stuff that we just overlook that person that may have said something that the Holy Spirit is prodding us to minister to them. Just give them a phone call or whatever, and we just, for speaking for myself, I just get busy and I don't follow up on that.
Yeah, it's good. Let's
That's what
thank
we're
you.
here for.
I want to jump back to what you alluded to, Ryan. When was the last time you were ill for an extended period of time? How were you cared for and by whom? And then this is kind of like a second question, but how do you feel when you have to depend on others? Does anybody want to share a story?
well, I'd like to comment on that just because you were alluding
Sure.
to what I just said. And how I think the church fits in here. This is indicative of the health of the church family, because in my accident, and I don't want to bore you guys with all the details, but the whole church, literally the whole church, all hundreds, 200 plus of them, had a role in my recovery and in my hospital stay. And I think this is indicative of how we, as a church family here in Austin, Buda, Texas, need to view ourselves in relations to other people. We all have a role in the healing, the spiritual healing, or the spiritual growth of the family.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think we talked a little bit about the prevention too, right? I think there's also, it's nice if I hurt my leg, I can go and get it, whatever. If I pull a muscle, I can go have it treated. But I can also just try to stay in shape and keep myself from getting hurt too. And I think that's also what we can talk about too, is that like maintenance of seeing each other often and contributing to that. Does anybody else have a story they want to share?
I've had multiple surgeries that have caused me to have to be, in bed for extended periods of time. And John's been by my side through all of those, but we've had varying levels of outside support. And it's noticeable, very much so, the difference for him when there's more support surrounding the entire family.
Yeah. Well, I'll cover the second part of this question. I'm young and vibrant in my prime. I don't really, honestly, I'll probably just die before I ask for help. Like, I was up in Colorado and I couldn't feel my feet, and it wasn't even on my radar to ask for help. But my older, wiser friends like, hey, I have this GPS thing, we could just get a helicopter and we'll be fine. I'm like, no, let's just crawl out, So at least for me personally, I don't want to have to depend on anyone, and I'm probably never going to ask for help. So there could be a ton of things going on in my life, and unless you ask me directly, you're never going to hear about it. As if that could just be me and my own personality flaws. But I bring that up just to consider that there may be some other stubborn men out there like myself that they're just not going to be as quick to say, hey, I'm dealing with this, I'm struggling with this. But that doesn't change our responsibility to each other and the leadership to create a community that is still there for those people, I think. Somebody has the mic, there you go.
I don't think it's inaccurate to say it's just a man thing.
Oh, all right, on Mother's Day. Well.
But I'll say,
not touching it.
I was gonna give you a hard time, but I'm not. You know, there's a meme that I've seen where it says, one of the problems with being strong is no one thinks to ask if you're okay.
Yeah, it's we can make each other's responsibilities easier, right? Like if John knows he needs to help Alton with his stubbornness and his healing, well, I can make his job just a little bit easier by taking a little bit of initiative. Like, hey, let's go grab some coffee, or let's go grab something, and maybe we can ease into it a little bit better.
And not to hog the mic, but one of the things it took me a very, very long time to learn to say is I learned how to be tough enough to be tender over long periods of time of counseling and things. And I've found that I'm the strongest when I am vulnerable. When I am not letting people see who I am, that's when I'm the weakest. But when I really just say, I'm struggling with this, that's when I find that I'm the strongest. And that's when other people around me see me as a stronger person for being vulnerable. That's just my experience.
Yeah. My experience, kind of to go along those lines, is I've been very vulnerable with you guys and with years and years of people since my accident in '95. And my experience is we need to follow up, piggyback on what John just commented on, is we need to be vulnerable with each other in that so we can see each other's humanness and get by all the barriers of, looking good on Sundays, wearing our Sunday best, and see each other for who we really are. I think that's what the church is all about. And I love this discussion we're having this morning, Alton, because like we just talked about, it's a hospital for struggling sinners. And so we need to be vulnerable with each other.
And I think that kind of goes back to our confessions class, right? If we're confessing to each other, it's not just, hey, I'm a sinner, here's my sin, but it's also, I'm struggling here, or this happened, and let's talk about that. Next here, although the Lord himself, this goes back to our Ezekiel passage, right, where the leadership is not doing what it needs to do, but God says, I'm not going to let my sheep be without, I'll step in. Although the Lord himself steps in to fill the gap, the leadership gap, it's clear from verses 1-8 that he desires his appointed leaders to do their jobs. What are your own God-given responsibilities in the church? So, again, I'd like us all to think of leadership as leaders, because I think if you're here on a Sunday morning, you may not have a title of elder or deacon, but I think that, I'm of the opinion that we all have responsibilities, and hopefully we all feel that way after 9 weeks of going through this class. So when we're talking about healing, what are some things that we can do ourselves? How can we take that initiative? Yes, sir.
I've got an aunt who, in advanced age, she broke her hip and she wound up in the hospital. Now, this woman was a jokester. She would be telling jokes, she would be pulling tricks. She had a marvelous sense of humor, okay? So she's in the hospital with a broken hip. She can hardly move, and so she has to be attended by all these people. When I went in to visit her, I went to the front desk and I asked, I got out her first name, Ruby. Oh, she's over there. Everybody in that hospital knew her and had been built up by knowing her. She's a patient. She's in bad shape. She's old and she's damaged, and yet she is bringing cheer and joy to this whole group. So just because we're not the doctor or the nurse or the custodian or the cook or whatever else, we do have a responsibility. We've got skills that we can use. We need to listen to that still, small voice. Like the one that called Gideon. Gideon wasn't anybody. And yet he led, well, a very few people and had a marvelous conquest. So it's not us that's doing it, it's God through us. So we need to listen. You know, do I need to tell a joke today? Do I need to open the door for somebody? Do I need to just sit there and smile?
Yeah, I love that.
Listen to that still, small voice and do it.
And I like what you said, and I'll just say it a little differently, about even if we're not healed ourselves, it doesn't mean that we can't help someone else. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what John just said. We need to listen to that still small voice. And that reminded me that we don't talk a lot about listening to God, or at least I've not been exposed to it a lot, having been reared in the Church of Christ, in our fellowship. We need to spend time on our knees listening more to God in silence. And I appreciate Jim when he mentioned this in his sermon some time ago. Let's see, how do I make this applicable to today's discussion? Responsibilities to the church. We all have, I believe, a responsibility in that we need to be listening to our Father, and from that devotion, formulate our action plan.
Yeah.
Am I making sense to everyone?
I think we all have our own gifts that we can use, right? And we should be looking and listening to seeing how we can use those gifts.
I was actually just going to say, I mean, think of the people that, brothers and sisters that you've known in the past who have been such an encouragement, such a blessing to you. When I think through my life, a lot of those people were really good listeners. So quiet time and listening to God is unbelievably important, but it is a gift to be able to listen to each other well. And if you think about, so many broken people come to church and they come there for a haven for healing, but one of the things that we can lead with is to really listen to people, right? Because that's something the world doesn't do well.
I like it.
Alton, you mentioned earlier about your time in Colorado. And we have this tendency to want to rely upon ourselves. And in your case, had you done that, you could have very well lost your toes, fingers, feet, who knows? Life. But I think we also have a tendency not to give things to God in prayer. We don't want to bring this up, so we miss out on a lot of prayers, unfortunately. There is no physician that we go to here on this earth that's going to be better than the great physician that we serve. So I think we should be giving even our smallest cares. How many times have we said, this is so minor, I don't need to bother Jesus with this. We'll get this figured out. I'm thinking in my older age, I want to run all this stuff by him. I don't want to leave a single thing unsaid, because I know that he has greater knowledge and greater power and greater everything than I ever thought about.
It's good. It's good. Well, we're almost out of time here, so let's bring it to a little bit more of our own application. This week, what is one way you will personally address one or more of the responsibilities of verse 5 back in Ezekiel 34, which were strengthen the weak, bring back the strays, heal the sick, search for the lost, bind up the injured. Let's do some tactics, give ourselves some homework. So how can we do that better? I didn't answer this question, so you guys are going to have to help me out.
I feel like I'm dominating the discussion, so I apologize for that domination. But I think we need to always be keeping our antennas up for good news that can be spoken, Alton. What do I mean by that? I mean, well, I'm leaving for Brazil in a few days to go share good news down south of the equator for a while. And so I think we all need to be searching ourselves and looking for ways we can be going about the business of sharing good news to our workmates, to our family, to my brother who has not come to church in years, so I'm speaking to myself here, to everyone. You know, how can we make this our lifestyle?
But like specifically, can you put on your calendar, I'm going to call my brother this week? Or we probably, each one of us, have that one person when I say, who's that person that you want to invite here? Who's that person that you'd love to have at your next small group meeting? It's probably a name that just came into your head. So can we decide in this class, like, well, this is how I'm going to bring back the stray, search for the lost. Maybe there's somebody on our handout thing today. Maybe we could pick up the phone, shoot a text to that person.
Yeah. See, Alton, this is good. This is good that we're thinking about this and discussing this today, because we need to be, though there's no verse that mentions this specifically, I think we need to be a proactive people about how are we going to do this? How are we going to live out the Christian life we've all been called to?
Well, I think it makes a huge difference. And one of the things, one of these classes I taught, somebody took the initiative and sent me an email and said, that was a really good class. And they even gave like specific reasons why they thought it was good. And I thought, oh, that was nice. Yeah, maybe I'll teach another class, right? So I don't necessarily think of, like, I need healing to come up here and teach a class, but it sure pumped me up, you know? I thought, hey, well, at least one person thought it was good. Let's do it again, you know? And I think if you can't think of anything, surely you can look around and see someone and say, hey, there's at least one thing I can say to them to just be complimentary, or, hey, you got a great smile, or anything. We could probably figure out something. Yes, sir.
My mother grew up, it's more blessed to give than to receive. She was a very strong woman, very skilled, talented, and she helped all kinds of people. But she did not like to ask for help. And there was a point in her life when she needed other people to help her. And I told her, yes, it is more blessed to give than to receive. But you've got to grow up and take that secondary part and give somebody else the chance so that they can have the greater blessing. You are giving them the greater blessing by having them help you. So this list is what can we do for somebody else? Well, sometimes we need to raise our hand and say, I need help. So I would add that to your list. Do you need help? Hey, let somebody know. And come on, man up. Accept that secondary blessing.
I love it. All right, well, we're going to end on that. So I appreciate y'all and your participation. I think it's been good. And like I said, that was a lot of the compliment, I think, was you guys pitching in. So appreciate that and waiting for the mic. It's really good online. So thank y'all. Yes, sir.